Notes on the margin. Good evening. I am Brooklyn Borough President Antonio Reynoso,
And good evening, I'm Britt Bird, Senior Planner for BP Reynoso.
and this Uniform Land Use Review Procedure public hearing is being conducted from the Brooklyn Borough Hall courtroom. There are 3 applications on the agenda. Please note that this hearing is being recorded to comply with the open meetings law. The video will be posted on the Brooklyn Borough President's YouTube channel. Following the application's presentation and our question and answer sessions, members of the public who are in attendance tonight will have the opportunity to testify on the applications. All comments are limited to 2 minutes. Members of the public may also submit comments to testimony@brooklynbp.nyc.gov for the Borough President's consideration until Friday, June 21st, 2024. If you call the first item.
Calendar item number 1, Alafia Street Mapping. A city map amendment application by Vital BDC LLC involving the mapping of 3 new streets that are being built as part of a new development, Alafia, located at the former Brooklyn Development Center site on block 4586, lot 300 at 875 Erskine Street in East New York, Community District 5. Community Board 5 voted to conditionally approve this application on May 22nd with the conditions that the development team is communicative with the board throughout all phases of the development process, including any changes in traffic patterns and pedestrian flow. The community board also requested cooperation from the development team to ensure all partnering agencies make provisions to ensure adequate temporary signage and postings are implemented to address pedestrian safety and quality life matters for nearby residents. Please state your name and present this application.
Good evening, everyone. My name is Lee Brathwaite. I'm with Apex Building Group.
Randall Trey from Riseboro Community Partnership.
We're two of the 4 development partners involved in the development of the Alafia project site.
That's not us.
Jesus, could we have the first presentation put up for the Alafia Street Mapping?
So this project is a project that, as Lee said, 4 partners, Riseboro Community Partnership, Apex Builders, L&M Builders, and SUS Services for the Underserved, applied for it in 2018, and we are now currently building it. It's built on the old Brooklyn Developmental Center, and it's located in the East New York section of Brooklyn. So this project is what we feel is going to be a tremendous project for the East New York area and for Brooklyn as a whole. We're intending to build 2,400 to 2,600 units of affordable housing, up to 80% AMI, and a portion of that housing will include supportive housing, set-asides, and senior housing. Services will be provided by Riseboro, SUS, and other community partners. There'll be particularly 50,000 square feet of commercial and community facility space and 2,000 square feet of 20,000, excuse me, thank you. 20,000 square feet of food production center, and it will be done, built in the passive house style.
So over the years, there's been a lot of development in the Spring Creek section of Brooklyn. And as you can see with these 3 various time frames, 1994 to 2006 to 2017, the street map, the grid has expanded. And in 1996, they established the network, the street network that our project is connecting into. Next. So we've gone through a couple of the steps so far. We are at this stage presented to you at the Brooklyn Borough President's session, and hopefully we will get your approval and we can get through the next 2 stages of the process. Next. So here is the proposed map change. The proposed action is to add Abule Avenue, Vital Avenue, and Field Drive to the city map. Abule Avenue is at the north end of the project site, and Vital Avenue and Field Drive are at the south end of the project. The alternative map establishes the meets and bounds of the project and the streets, the grades, and associated with the public right-of-way for these three new streets. And it was done in conjunction with DOT, with their DOT's geometric design configuration plans. Next slide. So here's what Abule Avenue, it will be connecting Erskine Street to the left of this chart, over to Fountain Avenue to the right. And this is on the north side of the project site. The project site is approximately 25 acres. And with the old development center, there were no cross streets. So when we originally designed the concept, there were no planned city streets. But then as we got approved, as the project was approved, we then had to work with the city in order to establish these streets. So this Abule Avenue is on the north end of the project site. Next slide, please. And Vital Avenue is on the south end of the site, along with Field Drive. Vital Avenue also connects Erskine with Fountain Street, and then Field Drive connects Vital Avenue to Seaview Avenue on the south. And Field Drive is primarily being used for trucks, and particularly DOT, to come and remove refuge and garbage, because we're building what we're calling a maintenance hub on the south end of the project. So all of the garbage and recyclables and the like will be brought down to the south end of the site at this holding location, what we're calling the maintenance hub. The DOT trucks and any other service trucks will come into the area from this end off of Seaview Avenue, and they will remove all the refuge with the intent to make sure that we're not leaving any unsightly garbage and the like on the property where people are living. Sanitation trucks, excuse me. Next slide. So our rationale is to establish these streets so that they are part of the critical public infrastructure, so that they can be properly maintained. So that's our formal presentation. If you have any questions, please.
Do you have any details if the proposed streets are going to include like street calming measures, like raised intersections or curb bump outs?
So all of these streets have proper curbs so that we can provide traffic to go cars to drive one way or the other. One way going from Fountain to Erskine, and one going the other way with proper curbs so that people can, with sidewalks, so people can walk. And on the Vital Avenue exit, there's a turning lanes to make sure that people can turn out from Vital to Erskine.
So would there be parking on these streets?
There will be parking. There's going to be parking on certain parts. Let me get it right. So for parking on Vital Avenue, there'll be parking on the south side of the street between Erskine and Field Drive. The remainder of the street parking has not been designed yet, but we're going to do that as we build out the rest of the site. For Field Drive, it's designed for parking on both sides of the street. And for Abule Avenue, it's designed to street parking on the north side of the street. Okay. But pedestrians will be able to walk on the sidewalks on either side of the street.
Okay, so that's why we say curb bump outs are the ones where at near the intersection.
Yes.
Would bump it out and then start the parking, maybe 2 parking spots away from where it is.
So that would be a decision made by the Department of Transportation. These are going to be public streets. These are not going to be private streets. So once this has been approved, the streets will then be turned over to DOT, and the traffic calming and those other measures will be determined by DOT.
Okay, that's good to know.
But
Thank
we'll
you.
be working in conjunction with them to make sure we can accommodate the comments and questions we've gotten from the community board, and provide that information back to the DOT.
Yeah, no, absolutely. DOT, the Department of Transportation, we're trying to do things like daylighting and curb bump outs, and those are things we don't want to lose in the creation of new streets, which is very rare in our city. There are concerns raised by Community Board 5, particularly regarding the pedestrian safety and construction phasing. What were those, and how did you feel you addressed them?
So from a construction phasing point of view, we initially started with making sure that all of the, anybody who's working on the site, we identified a parking spot on the campus that is away from traffic, that is off of the outer way of construction, so that all the construction workers and trucks would be resident on the property. We are not allowing anyone to park on the city streets. We've also worked closely with the community board whenever we've received complaints about parking. For example, there were instances where some of the trucks from the Home Depot or wherever were parking on the street and they thought they were construction parking trucks. So we were able to identify those and get those removed from the locations so that they weren't creating any obstructions for the surrounding community. From a safety point of view, we're doing the same thing. We have security personnel on site. We've got video cameras to make sure that there's proper egress and exits from the site, and we control the access. And we will be working closely with the council member's office and the assembly member's office when it comes to once we have residents and we're leasing up the property to make sure that we're providing the level of security and service that they require.
Okay, and then
Those discussions are in process right now.
yeah, and then now that I know the DOT is going to be dealing with like the street safety portions of it, or would we have to build it out? Again, we can have those conversations with them. The street names, what do they mean? What do they represent? Why is it that we chose these names?
Sure. Yes.
So when we were looking at the site, the entire project, we wanted to make sure that the project had names that represented the community. And so we hired an anthropologist, Dr. Maria Longoria, who was at Omega Everest College. And we basically looked at different names that could potentially be positive names for the community. And so we looked at Obule as actually the name of the project. And Obule means village in Yoruban. And so we looked at Obule, but we decided to go with Alafia, which means health or happiness. And so we went with Alafia, but we still thought Obule was a good name, so we chose Obule. Vital became as a name because the original name of the project was the Vital Brooklyn Project. There's several Vital Brooklyn projects in the community, but we thought that this would be sort of representative of the start of this project. And Field Drive was a small street that we just, was sort of a name that we figured would work well because it goes from Vital to Seaview. And so it was just a small street. So that really doesn't have as much significance. But we thought the Vital name and the Abule name both have significance. And we're going to continue to work with the council member and the community if they feel that those names should be changed. But I think we really would hope that they keep Abule because it does represent what we believe, which is village.
Yeah, I definitely just outside looking at it objectively. Abule sounds appropriate, but Vital and Fields is just so many great people, events, historic moments in Brooklyn that can no longer have the honor of a straight street name, and this would be an opportunity to do that, and maybe figuring out a way to honor those legacies of people, of moments. I think would be a great opportunity, given that these would be new streets and not co-named streets.
Right. So that we felt, and we thought about that, but we felt that it's incumbent upon the community, and we spoke to the council member that the community chooses those names. We didn't want to put it up on ourselves to choose those names. I think so. We, if the community decides to, with the help of the council member and yourself and others, we'll be happy to support you in any way on that.
Okay. Did you explore shared street or pedestrian plaza typologies? We wanted to know the necessity of these streets and whether or not they are necessary, and whether a shared street or pedestrian plaza might have been a better alternative.
Can we go to the second slide, please? In the beginning, the second, I think it's the second slide. Okay, leave this one here. Yeah, this one. Oh, wait, go back. One more. Right here, yes. So in our concept of, go back, one, right there, stay right there. Okay, so in our concept, if you'll see what we have identified as 4-acre plaza and a park fitness loop. In the interior, our project was originally designed so that each one of these buildings is contained amongst itself. So there's a private plaza that the residents will be able to live in and interact with in their area, and or they can go out to the common plaza. And so that's how we originally designed the concept without the public streets. Once we got approved and we started working with DOT, we needed to create those public streets given all the infrastructure that we were working with. And so our idea is everything inside the complex will be shared and it'll be open to the community and their pathways, not necessarily public streets the way that the DOT has worked along with us. So that was our concept, and that's why we think we've cared for the open space for the community to come and interact and partake. So for example, the community center is in the center of this complex, so people from the surrounding community and the residents can partake of all the services in the complex.
Well, thank you for your testimony and answering our questions. The panel is now excused. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much.
Thank you very
Thank
much.
you.
Appreciate your time.
We'll now call for testimony on this application from members of the public in attendance tonight. Please note that all comments are limited to 2 minutes. Is there anyone here willing to testify?
As a reminder, for all three items to testify, you can fill out a slip at the entrance. I will note for everyone watching on WebEx, we accept testimony in person at the hearing and written to testimony at brooklynbp.nyc.gov.
So hearing no further comment, this item is now closed, and please call the next item.
Calendar item number 2, 250 86th Street rezoning, a private application by Dr. Helen Kim proposing a zoning map amendment from R32 Bay Ridge Special District to R6B Bay Ridge Special District, and a zoning text amendment to map a mandatory inclusionary housing area. These actions would facilitate the zoning compliance of a 2-story mixed-use residential and community facility building containing medical offices at 250 86th Street in Bay Ridge, Community District 10, Brooklyn. Community District 10 voted to disapprove this application on May 22nd. Please state your name and present this application.
Richard Lobel of Sheldon Lobel PC for the applicant. Good evening. Thanks for having us here today. I'm joining Dr. Kim to present the 250 86th Street rezoning application, a very straightforward application. What we're seeking here is to rezone 9 lots and a portion of a 10th lot on 86th Street in Bay Ridge from an existing R32 zoning district to an R6B district within the Special Bay Ridge District, and also, of course, with that to map a zoning text amendment to allow for inclusionary housing. This would allow Dr. Kim to locate her medical office on the street and a portion of a 2-story and basement building. No enlargements are proposed to this building, which will remain the same as far as the building envelope. The next slide shows the zoning map. Again, to note, we're in the Bay Ridge Special District and also within an R32 district. Of note, on 3rd Avenue, which is adjacent to us and which we'll see more clearly in the area map, this would allow us to extend that existing context along 86th Street, an 100-foot wide street per zoning. Really, the street is well able to handle the marginal additional density which would be brought about by an R6B zoning district here. I would also note that the R32 here has been in existence since 1961 for over 60 years, and having done other rezonings both in Bay Ridge and beyond is well suited for the additional bulk pursuant to an R6B. The next slide shows the extent of the zoning district boundary. Again, to the east of the site, you can see the black line denoting the R6B along 3rd Avenue, and then the 9 lots and a portion of a 10th lot that would be included in terms of the existing and proposed rezoning. The next slide is the area map, which I think really well illustrates, despite the fact that, there we go, that it's now clear. So you see the dotted area, which shows the proposed R6B district. So number 1, we take an existing R6B district that exists along 3rd Avenue and stretch it to encompass these additional 9 lots. That's considered to be within the context. You're taking an existing context and using it in an adjacent district, which is, you're not creating something here that's out of character with the area. In addition to that, 86th Street is an extra wide street here at 100 feet wide. again, can handle the additional density. You've got the 86th Street stop for the R train, a mere block and a half from the site or from the rezoning area, as well as Third Avenue, which has bus routes as well. You note that an R6B district is one which basically encourages road-type housing. It doesn't really disrupt a local area like this where you have 2 to 4 story buildings and homes. It really kind of adds to that. The additional development that would be caused by this would be minimal, if any. Indeed, when we looked at this from an environmental standpoint, none of these 9 lots would really be induced to develop from the additional R6B density. It would allow Dr. Kim to locate her medical practice here, but other than that, there's really a marginal increase. To the extent that someone did increase in the future, those buildings would cap out at 4 to 5 stories, well within this existing context. The remaining slides show pictures of the surrounding area, again showing the site. As you see in the upper right picture, 2-story, or actually directly in front of you in the upper left, a 2-story plus basement building, very similar to the buildings in the area. Feel free to page through the pictures. We can just roll through those. Again, showing the row house context of the surrounding buildings. And then we have the proposed plans. Again, existing and proposed are the same. You got, next slide, showing the each floor, the basement floor and ground floor with Dr. Kim's medical practice, and the second story with a residential unit. So if you just want to page through the last one, again, what you see is what you get. In conclusion, we think an R6B is entirely appropriate here, and the applicant team would be happy to answer any questions.
Have the neighboring property owners been informed of this application?
So I'll answer. There were attempts to speak to some of the neighboring property owners who, some of which were unavailable. I know that Dr. Kim did reach out to the Salvation Army, had trouble connecting with them. Some of the other property owners did take advantage of the notification at Community Ward 10 and did speak at the hearing.
Then what would be the effects of the City of Yes for housing opportunity on these proposed rezonings?
So for the proposal for the R6B, the density and the additional square footage would be stepped up maybe 0.2 FAR, from a 2 and a 2.2 with affordability to a 2.2 and a 2.4. In addition, a total height would go from 50 to 55 feet with a qualifying ground floor to 60 to 65 feet. And then the parking, of course, as with all of those proposals, would be reduced, eliminated. So marginal differences, which we think are still appropriate for this street.
Okay. The panel is excused. Thank you so much for your presentation.
Thank you, Board President.
Absolutely. Now we want to call for testimony on this application from members of the public in attendance tonight. Okay. Well, the hearing no further comment, this item is going to be closed, and we'll call the next item.
Calendar item number 3, City of Yes for Housing Opportunity, a public application by the New York City Department of City Planning proposing a citywide zoning text amendment to expand opportunities for housing within all zoning districts and across all 59 of the city's community districts. This application was referred to community boards, borough boards, and borough presidents concurrently for a period of 60 days, ending July 8th. The City Planning Commission will hold a public hearing on this application on Wednesday, July 10th. Please state your name and present this application, and I'll note that I believe the remote at the podium should allow you to advance the slides.
Great, thank you. The David Weiss class, Brooklyn office of the Department of City Planning. Happy to be here. I'm going to keep this presentation relatively short, as many of us already have heard kind of the general philosophy of what's included in the City of Yes for Housing Opportunity. And so I think we might have advanced a little bit too quickly already, but actually this is fine. Yeah, there we go. So the high-level overview of the City of Yes for Housing Opportunity is we want to make it possible to build a little bit more housing in every neighborhood, right? The situation that we have right now with such a severe shortage of housing really puts tenants and renters, prospective renters, as well as existing renters in our city in a really, really difficult spot, as well as putting homeowners in a difficult spot as well. And what we're trying to do here is by increasing the supply of housing, both market rate and affordable, we think we could put a significant dent in the housing crisis. Great. So we want to extend this citywide. right? And we've said in every neighborhood, and that's something that we're going to repeat over and over again because that's a really important part of the proposal. What we want to do is basically say we're at such a severe shortage of housing in New York City, and how do we add enough housing to make a significant dent in the housing crisis and actually bring prices down without inundating any neighborhood with significant dramatic aesthetic changes or overtaxed infrastructure. We can spread it out and make sure every neighborhood plays its part without, drastic, significant, and severe changes. Right? So, very, very high level overview. What you see here in the map, and I think we have the Brooklyn map in the next slide. What you see in the map here is the difference between our low density districts in New York City and our high density districts, right? So this is Brooklyn, as you see here. The high density districts, medium and high density, are shown in yellow. Those are R6 through R10 districts. Oop, a little bit too fast. There we go. Those are R6 through R10 districts. And in blue, you see the lower density districts, R1 through R5. So we want to allow in the low density districts, those shown in blue here, for missing middle housing, right? Missing middle refers to not only the scale of housing that we'll talk about, not huge towers, something that we find to be relatively appropriate in many of these neighborhoods and actually exist in many of these neighborhoods already, but also for the type of person that it may serve, right? That missing person, the person that may not have an income low enough to qualify for affordable housing or for Section 8, but doesn't exactly make an income that can help them with market rate rents, right? And that's a part of the city that we really want to help provide for. We want to also help homeowners, easy for me to say. We want to help homeowners by providing additional flexibility in their homes and allowing for accessory dwelling units, which is a program that's been very helpful in a number of other cities, as well as here in New York itself. In our medium and high density districts, which you see in yellow, we're very proud of introducing something that we call the Universal Affordability Preference, or UAP for short. This will allow at least 20% more FAR, or floor area ratio, for a developer to use, so long as that extra floor area is used only for affordable and supportive housing and permanently affordable and supportive housing. The market rate FARs will not change. Citywide, we have a number of other proposals that we think can also be very important. We would like to lift our parking mandates, right? Basically, the Department of City Planning, we found, is the city is not very good at efficiently finding out exactly how much parking is efficient in a certain location. So a lot of times those parking mandates increase costs to developers who then pass those costs through to the rents of tenants, whether or not they actually use that parking. And so that's something that we would like to take another look at. And with citywide actions, we'd like to enable the further conversion of non-residential space to residential space in certain circumstances. We'd like to reintroduce small and shared apartments where appropriate throughout the city. And we'd also like to make it a bit easier to provide some infill housing on larger campuses. I'll fast forward here. So I spoke about this a little bit, so I'll fast forward through these pretty quickly as well. Our low density districts, you see them, I know it's difficult to see here with the different shades of blue, but you can see single family, two family, and multifamily districts. Multifamily refers to any district that allows 3 or more units, basically. And you can see in the images to the left what we're talking about when we're talking about missing middle housing. We have no intention of dramatically changing a lot of the character of these neighborhoods. In fact, the images that you see here are examples of buildings that we see in a lot of these neighborhoods already. A lot of times they were introduced before zoning, and currently you can't build a lot of these buildings, many of which are charming and lovely and some of the most beloved buildings in some of these neighborhoods. So we'd like to reintroduce those at certain locations, specifically near transit, on wide streets where that's appropriate, where there's a commercial overlay to allow a little bit more mixed-use development in some of those commercial streets, and in certain other areas as well. And we think that this is something that can really have a big impact on our housing crisis without dramatically changing the neighborhood or overtaxing infrastructure in low-density neighborhoods. Go to the next slide. And you can see it in a little bit more detail in Brooklyn here. This should make sense, South Brooklyn and Eastern Brooklyn having a lot more presence of these low-density districts. Medium and high-density districts, right? You can see where they are all throughout the city here. Not surprisingly, they're up in Manhattan and North Brooklyn with some streets elsewhere. And actually, I'm going to speed through this one as well and get right to Brooklyn. So again, you could see different shades of yellow, which I can explain in a bit more detail if need be. But really what we're doing here with the universal affordability preference is allowing a little bit more housing in some of these districts on some of these buildings, so long as that bump and that delta between what's currently allowed and what would be allowed after that bump is made up of fully supportive or affordable housing. We're very proud of that, and there's some things that we think are very special about this that I want to go into detail about quickly. Sorry, one more slide. There we go. So what we're seeking to do with UAP is replace a program called Voluntary Inclusionary Housing, or VIH, which many of you may be familiar with. And there's a few things that we think are really exciting about this. VIH currently has an AMI, or area median income level, of 80% of AMI. Right? If you want to, use the VIH program today and provide that affordable housing, all of that affordable housing needs to be at 80% AMI. You can't go higher, you can't go lower. That's what it is. What we seek to do with UAP is decrease the AMI to provide deeper affordability at 60% of AMI. But that's not all. We also want to allow income averaging, which you can kind of see on the right side of your screen here. Simplified version of something that could be feasible in a building like this, utilizing UAP and taking advantage of it, would be a couple of units at 60% AMI, as well as a couple of units at 30% and 90%, providing affordability to different folks in different stages with different affordability levels. So not only is it deeper affordability on average than VIH, but it's also serving a wider variety of folks. Next slide. And then our citywide proposals I'll go through very quickly. Right, so we would like to end our parking mandates, right? And so we want to make these parking optional. This is something that we think makes a lot of sense. There are tons of cities across the United States as well as in other countries that have already done this, and it has been proven to have a really significant impact on lowering rents, right? When parking is provided, oftentimes where it's not necessary, we end up with empty parking lots and higher rents because people have to basically pay for that parking in their rents, whether or not they actually use it. In other areas that are a bit further from transit, what we found already in New York City and abroad and elsewhere in the United States is that developers are often choosing to provide parking voluntarily. In fact, today, in places that are not very transit accessible and are a little bit more auto-oriented, developers are providing far in excess of our minimum parking requirements today, indicating that our minimum requirements really aren't doing a whole lot of worth there. Right? And we see the diagram here of 2 parking spaces is basically the size of a very livable and habitable studio apartment. And so what we'd like to prioritize is getting roofs over people's heads and heads in beds rather than providing housing for cars. That's really our priority here. And a very, very fast summary of some of our other citywide actions. We'd like to enable the conversion of underused buildings that are non-residential today, whether they be commercial, community facility that are oftentimes vacant, into housing. We'd like that's already allowed in some places in Manhattan, downtown Brooklyn, but there's restrictions on which buildings are eligible. We'd like to provide a little bit more flexibility for which buildings could be eligible. In the middle, you want to re-legalize small and shared apartments. We say re-legalize because a lot of these already exist and were legal for many, many, many years in New York City and provide a really great option for certain folks in certain situations. And finally, we want to eliminate barriers to contextual infill within campuses, right? Allowing new housing on sites in non-contextual districts, including campuses and other irregular sites, we think could be very important while still maintaining some of the things that are very important on those sites, maintaining sufficient green space and so on and so forth. And so I'll just finish up talking about some of the logistics. Promise, I'm just about done. We think that these changes can be really helpful by adding a little bit more housing in every neighborhood, significantly increasing the amount of affordable housing, both capital A affordable housing as well as naturally occurring affordable housing. We want to put less pressure on gentrifying neighborhoods. These are the neighborhoods in the city that have been hit the hardest by our housing crisis, and we'd like to allow a little bit more housing in every neighborhood to relieve some of that pressure. We'd like to end exclusionary zoning in low-density districts to allow a bit more housing there. want to add ADUs or allow the addition of ADUs, small units that tend to be naturally affordable to support homeowners and other types of families, and allow more sustainable transit-oriented development as well. Finally, I'll just go over what stage we are in the process. There we go. And so we're in our review period before the public hearing, before the City Planning Commission, which will be held in July. In September, there will be a City Planning Commission vote, and after a 50-day vote or so, this will go before the City Council. We're identifying roughly around the end of the calendar year. That's all I have to say. I really appreciate the opportunity. We'd be happy to answer any questions you've got.
Thank you. I do have a couple of questions. Why is the greater transit zone composed of inner and outer zones? Rather than enlarging the existing transit zone? And then, are there any proposals exclusive to the outer transit zone that don't apply to the inner transit zone?
Sure. So the way the transit zone roughly works now is that it really indicates what the parking requirements are going to be. With City of Yes, if it passes as proposed, parking mandates will be eliminated, so the transit zones won't really serve that purpose anymore. They'll still exist, but the purpose they'll be serving is indicating where some of our low-density proposals, like the transit-oriented development proposal, will be. Another change there is we're also seeking to modify the dwelling unit factor. This goes into the proposal of allowing small and shared apartments a little bit, or different types of small apartments. So our dwelling unit factor, what we're proposing here in the inner transit zone is to eliminate the dwelling unit factor to allow more small apartments where it's seems to be, more in desire and more in need. And in the outer transit zone, merely reducing the dwelling unit factor to 500 square feet. So that's one of the changes between the inner and outer. And as well, there could be mixed income waivers in certain areas and situations that are different between the inner transit zone and the outer transit zone. And I'm sorry, the second part of your question, I may need a refresher on that one.
You answered them. It's
Great.
the difference between the zones. Like why have them, and then the difference between them, or the benefits to one versus the other. Why not include SBS bus stations in the outer transit zone, for example?
Yeah, so bus stations are not always concrete, right? They change from time to time. And so what we really wanted to do was base our zoning regulations, particularly those that actually impact built development, what could be constructed, on something concrete, right? If we were to allow, a little bit extra bulk or floor area near a bus station, and that bus station, changed or went away or was modified in some sense, then the whole reasoning for having that extra bulk would be essentially gone. Right, and so that's something that's important there. Stakeholders wanted the text to be automatically applicable in the event of new transit lines as well as new transit situations in the future. And so this also necessitates defining the outer transit zone based on fixed infrastructure rather than bus stops, which can change.
Okay. Are there areas that might be appropriate to exclude from the UAP proposal due to potential impacts on sensitive resources identified in the EIS?
Yeah, so the environmental review for a citywide proposal, it really can't be site specific. There's just really no way to do that well. But we did conduct extensive research, and before and after, we referred the proposal. And we saw that throughout that referral period and our outreach with community boards, as well as some of our research beforehand, we thought that'd be the best way to find some of those sites where zoning proposals may pose issues, right? Stakeholders have asked questions about sites across the city, and so far we haven't identified any sites that'd be able to develop where some of these marginal height increases or floor area increases would pose significant issues for sensitive resources. That said, we're continuing to hear all the feedback that comes in.
Would the Brooklyn Botanic Garden be a site that you would consider?
I think it's site specific. I'll allow a colleague to kind of go into detail.
Thank you, Borough President. I'm John Mangian, head of the Housing Division at City Planning. So thanks for having us. Yes, that site has obviously received a considerable amount of attention, so we're looking very closely at it.
Yeah, we just want to be careful. It's site specific, but this is specifically an area where sunlight is absolutely necessary for its existence. I just want to sensitive resources identified in the EIS. It's like specifically put there. I just don't want us to gloss over it. Specifically because there was a rezoning that actually happened in the Dinkins era that was supposed to address this permanently,
That's
and
right.
that the UAP would affect that in adding height that wasn't supposed to be there and can cause trauma or a lack of sunlight to very important, a very important and iconic area in Brooklyn.
We hear you loud and clear, and
Okay.
definitely have our eyes on the site. Thank you.
I believe right now it's the only site that we're looking at, that we're presenting to. It's the only site we're presenting. We're not asking for a large array of exemptions in this plan overall, but that site is one site where sunlight is necessary. If the UAP were to be extended to R5 districts, how large would the FAR bonus need to be in order to make affordable housing production viable?
The short answer is it would need to be pretty high, such that it would maybe be provide a little bit more bulk than some of the R6 districts even. Really what we're doing for UAP, it doesn't include a market rate bonus, right? That includes only a bonus for affordable and supportive housing. So typical lot sizes in R5 districts that we find in some of these lower density districts and these R5s are usually too small to kind of support a significant amount of housing that would actually make it viable for a developer to build something like that, right? And so increases, basically, if we wanted to increase a density such that it would make any feasibility sense for that to be provided, they would have to be higher FARs, like I said, than some medium density districts, which isn't really rational from a land use perspective for an R5 to allow further bulk than an R6 or an R7 family. And so increases of that magnitude are more appropriate in the context of like a site-specific zoning change if it's appropriate in that location. But we are still very proud of kind of what we're doing in our low-density districts or proposing here to allow development to ensure that the neighborhoods can basically contribute, to our housing shortage. Hence, a little bit more in every neighborhood.
In our, I guess, contestation to that, or how we contest that, is just that the people that have done very little continue to do very little in this plan, and the people that have done a lot do more. So it's just further, polarizing the communities that think that they've done a lot, and if you've shown that you guys want to relieve the burden of the housing crisis on the people that have already done that work, or the neighborhoods that have already done that work, this doesn't necessarily do that, right? We're asking very little from people that have given very little, and asking for a lot more from people that have given a lot. And the UAP, what we're trying to do is just see if the R5 district is an area that we can look to see more opportunities for UAP or affordable expansion. So that's the premise of why we're asking that question, is to see if there are areas that could do a little bit more to catch up, or to give us more support.
Yeah, if I may.
Yeah, absolutely.
I appreciate that comment, Borough President. We've had that response from a number of community members and community boards as well, and it's certainly legitimate. What we found in our existing status quo is that there's so much pressure on a lot of these gentrifying neighborhoods because a lot of the low density neighborhoods can't allow anything, right? Even if it's not mandated as affordable. People, would like to develop in a lot of these places, but all of that pressure really goes to some of those gentrifying neighborhoods that, as you say, in many cases have already produced quite a bit of housing. And so what we anticipate, based on a lot of our research, is that allowing a bit more housing, even without the affordability mandates, would still relieve quite a bit of pressure on some of those neighborhoods and allow them to, allow things to stabilize a bit more. That said, we're continuing to do research on the best way to ensure every neighborhood does its part.
Thanks, David. And specifically for the R5, R4, even some of the R3 sites, we are creating opportunities on the margin, especially the larger sites in those districts that are going to see multifamily buildings of 10, 15, 20, 25 units. We fully expect that those developments will use the new tax benefit to provide some affordable housing, and are looking at opportunities that can work with the zoning as well. One more thing worth mentioning is that one of my favorite conversations I'm having is with HPD about the missing middle building typologies. That actually works really well with affordable home ownership as well. If you're doing rentals, you want 100 units or something or more. When you're doing affordable home ownership, it works best at 12, 15, 20 or something like that. And so we see opportunities with the missing middle proposals for that too.
And then just to be clear, the intention here is not to only expand the opportunities for the UAP program to these smaller locations. It's just housing generation, generating new housing in general. Like I'm not asking for the UAP and the affordability. It's just more density across the board. And then R5, is there an opportunity for us to figure out a way to get more density? And I thought the UAP program is something that you've established as an initiative, and maybe just expanding that one might allow us to get more housing in general. It's affordable, which is great, but because there's no other tools in the toolbox in those areas to get more housing, we thought we'd throw the UAP. We just expanded the capture area for the UAP.
No, that's a really good thought.
Yeah.
Especially for sites that are larger than the typical sites that you see in those districts. For some of the larger sites, you will see, multifamily forms that look like more like a medium density district where things like that may be possible. So we are talking to folks about that.
All right. And then just to help with, because these are arguments that I have to make to the community. So I just need to really understand it, just understanding how many units we anticipate will be added by each proposal.
Yeah, so for the proposal as a whole, what we anticipate, based on our research and environmental research, is that we'll add somewhere from 58,000 to 108,000 units citywide, which is not sufficient for everything that we need, but is a really, really big step. The environmental review doesn't break this down into individual components of this proposal will produce this much and that proposal will produce that much. However, in the environmental review process, what we did is we looked at what's reasonably most likely to be produced in every, I think NTA, right, neighborhood tabulation area, and what we're seeing there, and this kind of goes back to your previous point about certain places, adding more housing than others, is that we anticipate that quite a bit of housing will be added in some of these lower density districts. Our lower density proposals that I introduced earlier, we do anticipate, given the feasibility and the market needs and just some of the desires that we've heard even before we went through this process from folks and homeowners in low density neighborhoods, is that quite a bit of that housing will be added in some of these lower density districts. And so there is a map in the environmental review, which I'd be happy to forward to you, which illustrates kind of roughly what we anticipate the density in each area would be.
Could you say whether or not there'll be more units produced through the ADUs than the UAP?
We have numbers on the ADUs, I believe.
Yeah.
Those are probably the two biggest producers. That said, there's more uncertainty with some components than others. Universal affordability preference, it sort of clicks into the existing zoning framework. So we were even able to do something like a thought experiment where we asked ourselves, if UAP had been in place since 2014, how many additional units would we have had?
Yeah.
100% affordable buildings, those would be a little bit bigger. Mixed income buildings, they would be a little bit bigger with the same ratio of affordable to market. And we found that we would have created about 20,000 additional income restricted units at an average of 60% AMI over the last 10 years.
Mm-hmm.
So that makes it, UAP, bigger than all our zoning programs for affordable housing since 1987, when the first ones were put in place.
Okay.
And the secret sauce there is our inclusionary framework today applies only to about 10%, 13% of medium and high density districts.
Mm-hmm.
If you expand that to 100% of medium and high density districts, you multiply by 10 the number of affordable apartments that you can create with a framework that already works really well. And so that is our workhorse in medium and high density districts. ADUs, it's more uncertain. We'll see where we end up with the proposal. We hope that we enact something strong there. But given the nature of lot sizes in New York City, we are not expecting, take up that even reaches 5 or 10% in any period of time. Our environmental review actually shows that we'll have we predict about a 0.5% take up per year. So that's 1 out of 200 1 or 2 family homes every year would add an ADU. That adds up over time, but there's more uncertainty there since it's a new thing than there is with the UAP.
Okay, so would that also say, I just need right now what the communities are saying is that Black and brown rezoned neighborhoods that have been rezoned over the last 10 years in the Bloomberg and de Blasio administration have been almost exclusively majority Black and brown demographic, are going to build more housing again during this program than all of the UAP areas, all the potential ADU areas in the entire city. So I think it's 10 rezonings that happened under both of them, upzonings that happened, and that everywhere else combined. So the 41 other districts would be doing less than those 10 districts that have already been rezoned and that have already committed to being a part of the solution.
Right. I
Can
mean,
you
when you
contest that? I just want to know.
well, I mean, it gets at the difference in nature between a neighborhood rezoning and what we're doing here, which is complementary, but almost the opposite. So a neighborhood rezoning, take one in Brooklyn like Gowanus, that's, pretty significant changes across a narrow geography that's resulting, I think there are 8,000 and some units in the pipeline right now. The housing opportunity proposals do nothing on that scale in any one place. It's incremental changes across the broadest possible geography in a way that our environmental review shows we expect about 0.7 units per acre over 15 years.
Right.
So that seems really underwhelming when you think about any one part of the city. But because the city is so big, that adds up to over 100,000 incremental units. So, and part of the approach here is not to overburden any particular areas, but part of the approach too is to alter the market dynamics that we see today, where areas like central Brooklyn are just getting, punished, both through a bunch of additional development, but also people who can't find housing elsewhere in the city kind of going farther and farther out looking for apartments to rent there.
Yeah.
If we succeed here, and if we're actually enabling housing in places that are shrinking today, your Upper West Sides, your Upper East Sides, parts of Lower Manhattan, that we take pressure off of some of the areas. I think of, Manhattan north of the Park. I think of central Brooklyn, areas that are just really getting hammered under the status quo. And so while it's hard to convey in environmental review, that is absolutely our intention here, to alter those market dynamics that punish certain neighborhoods under the status quo. And so we do think that these proposals, the core concerns here are the Black and brown neighborhoods that are suffering under the status quo. These proposals did, after all, emerge directly from our citywide fair housing report from 2020. And this is at base a fair housing proposal.
Yeah. So recently we've heard from several elected officials that would be reviewing this document or this, that they would want to consider removing the ADU portion of the city of Yes, which would completely counter almost everything you've said about equity and the conversation that we have about relieving distress. Because what it would do is allow for, again, the maximization and the extraction of almost exclusively these large, mostly Black and brown neighborhoods that have been rezoned, and completely relieving the rest of the non-contributors to the housing, supporting through housing in the city of New York. Would DCP move forward with the city of Yes if it is watered down or negotiated that ADUs not be a part of the plan? I guess what I'm asking here is, are there parts of this formula that just can't be touched for it to work?
I mean, you're absolutely right. I mean, since the fundamental goal here is for the first time ever to enact changes in literally every residential neighborhood from the lowest density to the highest density. When you look at the lowest of the low density areas, single family districts, two family districts that are far from transit, that may not have commercial districts there, that may not, we may not have applicability for our missing middle proposals there. ADUs is the thing that they would do there. So I do see that component as particularly crucial to these as a set of fair housing proposals.
Exactly.
And so, I share your perspective on that.
Okay. Just want to, for the record, it would threaten fair housing. So my thing here is that it would open up the potential for a lawsuit to the city of New York for its failure to, its failure to
affirmatively further fair housing?
Exactly, is what I'm assuming would happen there. So just want to give you a heads up. Like, I think I have some communities that have bared the brunt of building all the housing, are concerned about the equity and the fair housing implications of not pursuing the ADU portion of the city of Yes. All right, so And we don't, I guess you're gonna send us the map, because we just wanna know across community boards what each community board would be contributing in a, what I call a best case scenario, which is the development happening everywhere. We don't have that type of breakdown.
We have it by the NTA, Neighborhood Tabulation Area. That's a finer geography than community boards, actually. So we would be able to, take a look at the NTAs that comprise a given community board to get a sense of where in the distribution that they fall. It is a relatively narrow range per NTA. We do see development everywhere, and we do see some parts of the city that really see a lot of development today get a lighter touch under CHO than some areas that don't see any development at all.
All right, thank you. Now we're gonna call for testimony on this application from members of the public in attendance. So again, thank you so much. And again, please note that all comments are limited to 2 minutes. And I guess we'll call on the members of the public to testify. So thank you so much.
Thank you. I have 3 slips. Again, if you're here and you have not filled out a speaker slip, you can do so at the back. If you're on WebEx, you can submit testimony by email to testimony@brooklynbp.nyc.gov. So first, we have Daniel Prebuff.
My name's Daniel Preba. Citywide planning of this magnitude demands firm footing. So infrastructure should be adequate before even considering housing expansion. Brooklyn experiences issues and shortages with sewers, remember Hurricane Ida? Schools, hospitals, mass transit in numerous neighborhoods, and parking. Increased housing and population density equals increased refuse and vermin. Similarly, accessory dwellings will provide additional challenges for our police, fire, and rescue services. Do we really want to risk our residents further than they are at this point living in this city? The proposal recommends lifting parking mandates. Are we forgetting our elderly and physically challenged who depend on cars for transit? Mass transit is scarce in many areas, and Access-a-Ride offers long waits. To reduce scarce parking further would render these citizens homebound or depend on costly car services. Zoning changes are proposed to allow increased development. These zoning laws were first enacted to prevent overdevelopment and strain on infrastructure. Zoning restrictions were enacted to protect neighborhoods and cannot be capriciously modified without negative consequences. This proposal will allow speculators and developers to profit and generate fees and taxes for the city, but ultimately, New York City residents and future administrations will be left to remediate the aftermath. Reintroducing shared housing. Shared kitchens and other, can I continue? Thank you. Thank you, sir. Shared kitchens and other facilities. My grandparents lived in one 120 years ago on Broome Street. It was a tenement. There were legitimate reasons why this type of housing was phased out. Back then it was tuberculosis and cholera. Today it could just as easily be coronavirus. If history is ignored, it tends to repeat itself. I will sum up with 2 questions. Will an increase of housing volume really reduce rental costs because the property owners will find it in their hearts to lower the rent? Will the influx of those from outside New York remain stable with the prospect of increased housing options? I think we all know the answer. Thank you.
Thank you. Just want to, I think that was a case for comprehensive planning to DCP. Thank you for your testimony.
Max Davidson.
Here, there we go. Thank you for giving me the opportunity for public comment. I want to talk briefly about the impact of the housing scarcity crisis on tenants' rights right now. I have a close friend who's lived in Brooklyn nearly her whole adult life. She's a single mother of two in Flatbush. We had coffee this morning, and in the last year, she has dealt with mold, pests, asbestos in her home with her two children, one of whom is 1 year old, one of whom is 12 years old. She has no alternatives for anywhere to go outside of her rent-stabilized apartment. Without building additional rent-stabilized apartments, we are permitting landlords to basically operate slums in much of the city because she has no alternatives to housing. Also, you did not start the timer. I can really talk if you'll let me, but I won't do that.
We're gonna, it's only 3 people commenting. We're gonna give you guys a courtesy here with no timer, but we will remove that courtesy very quickly.
I'm not going to
Right.
abuse the power.
Yeah, the gentleman before you
Yeah.
took a little bit of extra time, not too much.
Just want to be mindful of not wasting anyone's time. But right now, there's a deep issue where people throughout the city are being abused by their landlords because they have no alternative to go. And that's why I'm supportive of the city of Yes. Additionally, for people who want to raise a family, my partner and I having conversations about moving in together, we'd like to start a family one day. We have no opportunities as young people. And I would point that, there's relatively few young people who are going to be testifying at this meeting. And I would encourage you to make sure we're planning for people who are longtime residents who are facing the housing crisis right now, young members of the community who want to start families and one day own a home. And then lastly, I want to just thank your land use director, Spencer. He's been a total rock star. I only waste 30 minutes of his time the other day asking him questions about the city of Yes. So I used to work for an elected official. I know it's always good when somebody says they're good at their job. So thank you for the time.
Thank you. Appreciate that testimony.
Sean McLaughlin.
There you go. Hi, everybody. I'm Sean McLaughlin. My comments will be brief. I just wanted to come and voice my enthusiastic support for City of Yes. The housing shortage in New York City has reached a crisis level. This housing shortage causes very high housing prices that lead to displacement of existing residents and stifles development by limiting the amount of future residents, both young and from elsewhere in the country, from moving to New York. City of Yes would be a big step forward to alleviating that crisis. Specifically, the universal affordability preference would enable wealthy neighborhoods to do their part to address the housing shortage and take rent and development pressure off of other neighborhoods that have handled the bulk of development in the last couple decades. And additionally, removing the parking mandates will have the 1-2 punch of lowering rents and reducing the number of cars on the road, reducing congestion and pollution, while not restricting developers for choosing to build more parking if they do think it's appropriate for their specific situation. Thank you.
Thank you. Is there anyone else that didn't sign up that would like to sign up now or would like to come up and testify? All right, seeing none. Seeing no further comment, this item is now closed. This ULURP public hearing is now closed. The borough president or I will review this application and submit my recommendations to the City Planning Commission, which will hold its hearing on these items at a later date. As a reminder, members of the public may still submit comment to testimony@brooklynbp.nyc.gov for my consideration until Friday, June 21st, 2024. This meeting is now adjourned.